Live from the Big Tomato, it's Toke and Geoff with Kings Pod 2020. We have a special guest for you tonight, GFC, George from Carmichael. George, why don't you say hi to our fans?
Hey, happy to be here. Looking forward to listening to you guys do your thing.
Now, George joined us last time right before COVID happened, so hopefully we don't have another worldwide pandemic or world war or something else break out after he leaves. So, Geoff,
listen,
what's going on, man?
All things considered, it wasn't so bad, okay? All things considered, not so bad.
Well, that's a topic for another podcast, let's just say. All right, Geoff.
We are back. Some things have happened in King's world that we got to talk about. We've had some front office hires. We've had some coaching hires. We've had some very despicable things happen at the draft. So we got some things to cover.
Why don't you go ahead and get us kicked off?
Well, I guess the first place we should start is, what do you think about this BJ Armstrong hire?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to pull the video up, but I couldn't find a good version of it on YouTube, and I don't know if I wanted to pull it up on X, but BJ Armstrong has been an agent. Obviously, you guys probably remember him when he was playing for the Bulls in the 90s, maybe a little bit. I think he was a bench guy for the Bulls, but after his playing career, he went into the agent world, and I think he had up to 19 players that he was an agent of recently. But more recently, he's been hosting a podcast with Scott Perry, so that's kind of his qualifications for joining the Kings front office. But with that being said, I'm going to say that I really like this hire. Really, I'm going to boil it down to 15 seconds of listening to him on the podcast where he talked about how analytics has ruined basketball and how you can't, the quote was something like, "You can't tell me the only good shot is a layup or a corner three." And just based off that alone, I like the guy. He played for the Bulls, so he's a winner. And, you know, that doesn't mean that he's going to be a great front office guy, but at least he's not just, as you put it last time, an early 2000s retread that Vivek is trying to just roll out there to extract more money using our nostalgia from the early 2000s. Right.
I will say he's leaning pretty heavy on this. The early 90s, we got the Detroit Pistons connection with Scott Perry, and then we got the Bulls connection with BJ Armstrong. So I guess he won, 3 championships with the Bulls?
I think he was on the first three-peat, from what I remember. So that sounds right to me. I could look this up. It's not like it's that hard. But yeah, BJ Armstrong, he was not a star player, and it tends to be the case, I find, that the best executives and the best coaches are not the star players. So,
right.
As a point guard, I think he's going to understand the game at a different level. George, what do you think?
Yeah, the guy won 3 championships with the Bulls, from what I understand. I actually do think he started as point guard in that final season, and I think he actually maybe even made an NBA All-Star team. So if that's part of the pedigree we're looking for and part of where we're hoping to take our people, then I think that perspective is important. But you mentioned something that I'd want you to expand on a little bit, sort of that early 2000s nostalgia. Is it time for us to just sort of walk away from that and go in a different direction?
Geoff, this is your topic.
I'll say we got more than just walk away from that. I mean, we're obviously not, so there's almost no point in even talking about it. But no, man, we gotta wipe it clean entirely. It's something that the fan base has, or I should say, the fan base looks back on it fondly. Of course, we love these guys. We see some of these guys around town, which is cool. Yeah, it's cool to see some of these guys at the gas station or at the bank or whatever. And it's cool that they still love Sacramento, but it's almost becoming a drag on the organization. Right. So these guys, we're trying to retread these guys so much. We're trying to recreate those years so much. We're trying to bring those guys back in to give us some of the magic. And it's not only is it not working, it's also kind of tarnishing what they had with Sacramento. Like Vlade, in my opinion, is a perfect example. Like
Mm.
Vlade had the biggest miss in Kings history. Like not drafting Luka Doncic was the biggest miss you could have possibly had. And as far as I'm concerned, maybe I don't line up with other Kings fans, but as far as I'm concerned, that totally tarnishes his reputation in Sacramento, because obviously we've seen you can get the number one pick out of that deal if you're willing to trade Luka Doncic. So it's a it's a I think we got to move away. I believe I said we got a carpet bomb the early 2000s, and I think I would
Hmm.
stand by that in a heartbeat. We got to move on entirely.
Yeah,
But
just
we're
take
not.
some diamond cutters to it. Just get underground. Just no survivors. That's what we need, right?
That's it. And I think it's interesting. I'm not sure. Did we? I don't think Mike Bibby was hired as the
Sac
Sac
State head
State.
coach.
Was he hired as the Sac State head coach during our last podcast? I can't remember.
I
But
think he was, but this isn't a Sac State podcast.
I think even that's kind of funny, though. It's like we're retreading at every possible moment.
Look,
The
Sac
city of
State
Sacramento is retreading.
basketball, Sac State athletics has been a joke historically. It's not. It's a commuter
Don't get me
school.
wrong.
Like whatever. That's
It's a
fine.
major come up for Sac State. That's a major come up and a major name for them to grab. But I do think it's funny that, like, again, any chance we have to retread with some of these guys, that's what we're gonna do.
I mean, look, it's slimy. It's Vivek trying to operate at a profit, which, like, in a way has utility as a fan. Like, you don't want your organization to be losing money, because then that's how you end up with what happened with the Maloofs, right? So, okay, he wants to run a profitable business. So what he's doing is he's taking advantage of the nostalgia because he can't build a winner. And he's like, well, let me just bring back these guys who you all know and love and put them in the positions.
Right. He's
mean,
trying to tug on the heartstrings. That's exactly what he's trying to do. It's not about winning. It's about tugging on the heartstrings so that he can get tickets sold. Because he knows that Sacramento's loyal. And who are we most loyal to? The guys from the early 2000s. So what are we going to do? Not go support Doug Christie when
hey,
they're
look,
potentially below 500?
here's a really, like, negative way to look at things. Um, Tyrese Halliburton has made more conference finals than those early 2000s Kings teams did.
Yeah, man. Oh boy, that's rough.
Someone was tweeting at me on Twitter. Follow me on Kingspod 2020 at x.com, whatever. Tyrese Halliburton has won more playoff games than the Sacramento Kings have won in the last 40 years. Thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like we said last podcast. I think that our love for the early 2000s Kings it is so unique to Sacramento, because again, you put that level of accomplishment in a different city, especially one of these cities that's used to winning, and it's like what a horrible run we've been on. We've never had a good run, for God's sakes. But for Sacramento, it's all we've ever had. So, like, the highest peak you've ever had is still the highest peak you've ever had.
So when you see a city like Oklahoma City, and I don't know what the score is to the game right now, we're recording as they're in Game 6 against Denver.
It's over.
It's over. Who won?
Denver.
Okay, well, that's
We're
great.
going to Game 7.
We're pulling
Love
for
that.
Denver in a major way, I think. But even Denver, that's another one. I mean, Denver is a bigger city than Sacramento, but Oklahoma City is like half the size of Sacramento. I think if you look at Indianapolis or San Antonio or a lot of these other cities, they're comparable. There's this attitude that we're Sacramento, so we don't deserve anything. But it's like, do you think people in Oklahoma City look at their team that way?
No, but the people in Oklahoma City have done a good amount of winning, and they haven't had a team for that long. So they've had a team for what, 20 years? Is that
17
wrong?
years.
Okay, so 17 years. They've had some ballers go through Oklahoma City. So they have an expectation that they're going to win and that they're going to rebuild and that they're going to find some more ballers to come through the city. And that has worked out for them. So whether or not, whatever you attribute that to, that's still the reality for them.
George, what's your take on kind of this whole attitude about the early 2000s?
Yeah, I think we got to get out from there. It's time to move on. It's been 25 years. Time to turn the page and move on and focus on winning. That team didn't win, and I think our goal ultimately is to win. So,
you'd hope.
Yeah.
But even that
Let me
statement
ask a
right
quick
there.
question, if I may, because we talked a bit about, I think, that team made up the majority of the Kings playoff runs and playoff wins, right? And we talked about Halliburton having a bigger number than that. This may not be a popular question, but I'll ask it anyway. Is that more of an indictment on the Kings and some of our failures, or is that possibly a feather in the cap for Halliburton in his game?
Geoff, I'm guessing you've probably thought about this longer than me because I never watched Halliburton play a single game in Sacramento. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Halliburton's the guy that impacts winning, and I think he has the attitude that is required to impact winning. I think you saw that when he was here in Sacramento. He talked a lot about how he was very open about it. He took it on his shoulders to say, I want to turn this franchise around and I want to turn it into a winner. You didn't hear that. You didn't hear that from
Other
Fox. You
point
didn't hear that.
guards.
Sure, exactly. You didn't hear that from Fox. You didn't hear it. I mean, I don't even know if Cousins was saying that. Like, you didn't hear it from any of these guys.
I mean,
that
I
were
think
supposed to-
Cousins was saying it, but Cousins had other issues.
Was he saying it like that though? Was he like, no, I'm like, this is my squad and I'm going to try to turn it around? Either way, my point is that Halliburton, as a real young cat, took ownership of the situation and was like, I'm here to turn it around. And that is why everyone was a little bit upset when he was traded, because they're like, there's so few people that come through Sac that are like, I'm a Sacramento guy and I can't wait to grow this city and grow the team and try to make something happen. There's so few people with that attitude, and he's one of those guys. And so, to answer your question, George, I think Halliburton is going to be a winner wherever he goes. And I think he's going to impact winning wherever he goes because he makes all the players around him better. And I think that's coupled with the fact that the Kings make terrible decisions on a regular basis.
Yeah, my take's a little bit more nuanced. I think that being in the East, he made the playoffs the last couple years. And then, once he's made the playoffs, what he's done with that, I think, it really speaks to him being a winner. But I think if you look at both last season and this season, they're maybe not a playoff team in the West, just based on the regular season. Now, the fact that he elevated his game in the postseason, I think, does speak to him being a winner. But I think that when you're looking at an Indiana or any of these other franchises in the East, I think even the Knicks, who we've considered a laughing stock, nationally for the last 30 years, you can have a season where you sneak into the playoffs in the East with like 36 wins. I don't remember what Indiana had. I think Indiana had a similar record to the Kings last year, though, and they made the playoffs, and the Kings were in the play-in. So I think that it's a both and. Tyrese is a winner, absolutely. I think he's proving everyone wrong. I think him finishing the season kind of ranked by all the different players as the most overrated player in the NBA. He's kind of shutting a lot of people up. So I do think that that's a fair analysis of Tyrese. But I think that the Kings are really in a bad situation just because they're in the West, and the West is the A conference. Like, even look at this last draft, and I don't want to get into the draft yet. It's a little early, but the top 2 picks went to the Western Conference. So it's like you look at all these teams that are killers in the West, and then you're going to give the number 1 pick to Dallas and the number 2 pick to San Antonio. So they're going to come up. So all the stars are always playing in the West. And if you don't have one of those guys, you can't sneak into the playoffs. I mean, Kevin Durant didn't make the playoffs this year. He didn't even make the play-in.
Yeah, I think, look, they're excellent points. I think certainly the strength of the West is clear. I think the one counterpoint would be all season long, most folks would have argued that Cleveland and Boston could probably hang with most of these teams and win an NBA championship. And Halliburton just played an integral role in beating Cleveland in 5 games.
Yeah,
I mean, and a lot can be said there about why and what happened and all the matchups and all the things. But at the end of the day, like they just
He's a
beat the
winner.
number 1 seed in the East in 5 games. I mean,
no, he's a winner. He's a winner. But again, he had the opportunity to do that. And they had a good enough record this year to make the playoffs. I think my point is, though, if you can't even get to the playoffs, like you don't have that chance to elevate.
Right. Look, we followed the yellow brick road. We started with BJ Armstrong and the Kings and that move. I think we get back to BJ Armstrong. My question is that Scott Perry's first official move? And how do you grade it if it is?
Well, I think his first official move was hiring Doug Christie.
Well, yeah, that's true.
But we kind of gloss over that because he was already here. Yeah, I mean, look, it's all these grades that we're going to give ahead of time are just conjecture. I just got back from Vegas. I don't know the future. If I did, my Vegas trip would have gone very differently. Okay. I think it's a good hire. I think the fact that it's not, a Sacramento Kings retread and it's someone who worked in the agent world and who I've heard speak at various times on his podcast sounds like a smart guy and sounds like similarly minded to me in the sense that he doesn't like all this 3-point chuck in and nerd stat, bean counting, whatever. So, I mean, I'm going to say it's like a B or a B plus just on the front end. We'll see. Maybe it's an A, maybe it's a C minus down the road. We don't know, but I like the thought process going into it.
Does he have any major accomplishments in front office roles?
I don't think he's ever worked in a front office. I think he's been an agent.
I think he was in the front office for the Bulls or something like that for a little bit. Maybe I'm wrong.
Okay. Well, it
Either
says on his Wikipedia, it says executive career, Sacramento Kings 2025.
Okay.
So I think that's it.
So yeah, I think it remains to be seen. We'll have to see where he lands when it's when the rubber meets the road, because he hasn't really proven an ability to evaluate talent. I don't know if you would say an agent evaluates talent. They're more salespeople at the end of the day. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it's going to look like, honestly.
I'm going to give a definitive A minus only because it's not Jeremy Lamb.
Oh boy. Well, we don't know. Maybe Doug Christie's going to hire Jeremy Lamb on the coaching staff. He has already hired an associate head coach in Mike Woodson, who's had a relatively mixed record as a head coach. Also former Kings great. He was on the original team that came over from Kansas City, but that was 40 years ago. We don't really consider him like a Sacramento retread in that sense. He coached the Atlanta Hawks and the Knicks, and then I think he also coached Indiana from 21 to. I think he was. He coached the University of Indiana. Excuse me, I was going to say, so which was a little underwhelming from what I understand with the Hoosiers. So, what do we think about Mike Woodson?
I actually thought he did a pretty decent job. At Indiana, I watched a fair amount of those games, like in the tournament and things like that, and I thought he did a pretty decent job. He had some NBA kids on those rosters. I know, like Trace Jackson Davis was on one of those rosters, and he turned out to be a pretty decent player for the Warriors. So, he's been around the game at least. So we'll see how it goes. Again, I don't think he has any great accomplishments to speak of, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm looking at his career as a head coach in Atlanta. First season, he won 13 games. Then he won 26 the following, then 30, then 37, then 47. And finally, his last season in Atlanta, he won 53 games, which would sound great.
We would take it immediately.
First season in New York, won 24 games. No, that's not right. He won 18 games. I think he was the interim coach, though. He won 18 out of the 24 games he coached in New York that first season. And then in his second season, which was his first full season with the Knicks, he won 54 games. And then in the last season he was a head coach, was 13-14. He won 37 games. So, again, it's the question. Like, if you're the Lakers, you're meant to, or the Yankees or the Dodgers, or like just pick your team that wins. They look and they think, who's the best person we could get in this position? And if you're the Kings, like that's how you should think. That's not how they think, in my opinion, based on the information that we have. Like if that's your mentality, you're not looking and thinking Doug Christie's the best person I could hire to be the head coach. Mike Woodson's the best lead assistant we can hire. Some of the other assistant coaches are pretty underwhelming. And again, it's that old early 2000s Kings nostalgia. We're hearing Bobby Jackson. We're hearing Darius Sangaila, which, hey, you know, he was here for like a year and a half or 2 years or whatever. Like, great. Good for, you know, like, I'm not even saying any of these guys in a vacuum wouldn't be a good addition to the coaching staff, but it's just like, why do we have to always go back to the well on this?
Right. Correct me if I'm wrong. Bobby Jackson just won the championship with the Stockton Kings as the head coach. Am I correct about that?
I think that was last year or the year before, because this season he was on Nick Nurse's bench in Philadelphia.
Oh, there you go. Okay. I was like, man, at least we got some winning on the bench, for God's sakes.
Hey, like I said, Bobby Jackson's not necessarily a bad hire. You know, he's left Sacramento and gotten hired somewhere. Like,
I was gonna say, I
you
actually
know,
appreciate that he was on somewhere besides Sacramento. Like someone else at least wanted to have him on the bench, for God's sakes.
and Nick Nurse is a hell of a coach, right? I
Yeah.
think we all agree on that. Like the guy won a championship in Toronto, which no one was expecting. So,
Right.
I don't know.
Are these coaches to an NBA franchise's success? These assistant coaches and these deep. I mean, we're talking about a handful of guys. Like, walk me through how important they are to a team's success. I mean, big role, small role, intermediate.
I mean, I would think. I think it depends on the on the coach, and it depends on the franchise. I mean, obviously, you see some guys with like some guys with coaching trees, and they turn out to be amazing head coaches, and they go on to do big things, and sometimes it never pans out. So again, I feel like I keep saying this on this podcast, but it still kind of remains to be seen. Like, you know, obviously you see, you know, some of the Popovich, staffs that are like, these guys have gone on to do big things.
Yeah, I mean, Phil Jackson doesn't have an impressive coaching tree.
Fair.
I mean, ultimately, the number one thing is the talent on the court. Like that's the number one thing. But I think that with winning organizations, because this is kind of the big thesis of the podcast, as far as I'm concerned, like in totality, is like the details do matter to some extent, but it's kind of the common thread through all of it needs to be like, is this excellent? Is it the best? Or is it just good enough? And so, how much of a difference do assistant coaches actually make to winning? That I don't know how you would quantify. The bigger issue, though, is if you're the Kings, like you shouldn't leave any stone unturned. Like if you could squeeze out a couple more wins this season because you have a better assistant coach on the bench than, you know, someone who's just passable, and you've been as bad for as long as the Kings, like you need to find the best staff that you can to take a relatively rookie head coach. I mean, Doug just finished 50 plus games this season or whatever, 60 plus 50 something games this season. So it's not a total rookie coming into the job, but he's not an experienced head coach. He's never coached a playoff game.
Yeah.
He's a lot of things happened this last season, but I think for most of it, he did a good job, to be honest. But I think the way that the wheels came off at the end of the season should have cost him an opportunity for a run back. But again, you know, as long as the Kings have the talent issues on the court, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference to the overall success.
I think a lot of the assistant coach's responsibility is also going to be the personality management side of things. So I think that is really where it's important for a head coach to choose the right assistant coaches. For example, you had Mike Brown running things run one way, and it seemed like the guys turned to Doug to kind of love on him a little bit, as he says, you know, try to be that kind of players coach. So some of it is like the good cop, bad cop stuff and trying to manage these guys who are making millions of dollars. And, you know, you might have one coach who's yelling at them and another coach who's trying to kind of love on them. And so, you know, having that person, those kind of the dynamic on the bench helps a lot, I think. And I think you got to hire the right people to make sure that dynamic is in the right spot.
Well, what do
Well,
you think, George?
in order to hire those right people, you have to have a mentality that you're willing to open the pocketbook both for coaching staff and for players, as opposed to run your organization in a way where you're just trying to make it pencil year over year. And I think the latter is much more of what the Kings are trying to get done, and that explains I think a lot of the moves in the management, especially from a personnel standpoint. People on the court. I mean, look no further than the way we're investing money.
Yep. Facts.
Well, what do you guys think about an organization like the Spurs? Because we talked about it, I think, a little bit in in our first podcast, Geoff, when we were talking about the Fox trade.
Right.
Like, is it that the Spurs are such a well-run organization, or is it that they had the players, or is it a combination of both? And how do you chop that up? Because we're looking at the Kings as a bad organization, and that's the reason that they lose, right? But another comparable market in San Antonio that has had a lot of success, they've won 5 championships. Now, they've had the number 1 pick 3 times in the last 40 years, and it happened to be all 3 times they got a generational talent. The Kings have gotten the number 1 pick 1 time in the last 40 years, and that was the Purvis Ellison draft. How much of that is you've got Tim Duncan, that gives you a large margin of error, and it lets you grow as an organization, and you're going to win anyways because you have Tim Duncan? And how much of that is, no, they actually are a super organization, and maybe Tim Duncan wouldn't have been the player that he was going to be if another team drafted him?
George, I'll let you take this one.
I think it's 100% organization as opposed to like players falling in your lap. A couple of examples why I think the biggest word is stability. So when you think of Greg Popovich, I mean, Greg Popovich has been the head coach there basically like since I started watching basketball, right? Mm-hmm. So we're talking about like the entire time I've been alive. So they have massive amount of stability there. They've won multiple championships. I don't know how many in that time, probably 5 or however many. They've made the playoffs pretty much every year with the exception of a few, right? And you could say, hey, yeah, a lot of players have fallen into their laps like Duncan or whoever, like everybody would have taken a guy like that. You could also counter argument that a guy like Kawhi Leonard, I mean, they developed Kawhi Leonard, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think that they drafted him. That guy was like homegrown, developed through their organization. And if it weren't for injuries, you could argue that guy, I mean, is one of the best that we've seen generationally in the last however 20 years, right? So I would say it's certainly organization. It goes down to stability. Most of the people there play for that name on the front of the jersey as opposed to one on the back, right? And they've got a lot of results to speak for that. So for me, that's stability's big, the organization's big, and you just don't see a lot of ego out of that franchise. Now, some of that going forward remains to be seen with Wemby and with Fox and with this new generation of people there. But up through that point in time, I think massive stability, tons of results, great organization that almost any NBA franchise would aspire to be.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I hear Steve Kerr talk about it sometimes. As much as I strongly dislike the Warriors, I hear him talk about it like it's nice to go through seasons without even thinking about that you might get fired, right? It's nice to go through if you're going through a rough patch. He said this, I think, when Mike Brown got fired. He's like, it's great to work for an organization that supports you through the rough patches, and you're not sitting there on pins and needles like you might get fired. And that's the stability that I think George is talking about. And you have to give your coaches the ability and the comfortability to make changes and to see something through, see a plan through, right? Because we're not able with the turnover that we have, we're not able to see a plan through, which makes the players not want to stick around. So, we may have been able to draft Duncan, let's say, but would he have wanted to stay here if we were not living up to ownership's expectations, and then coaches were getting fired and you had leaks and you had all the stuff that goes on in Sacramento? Or would he be like, I want to go somewhere where it's more stable? So I think, I totally agree with George that it's the stability of the organization that makes the most difference.
Two more guys, and then we'll let Toke cook here. He's got to cook on this one. I know he feels strongly about the Spurs, but two more guys, honorable. I'm saying honorable mentions, but they're not. These are top guys in Spurs history, right? Tony Parker.
Mm-hmm.
Tony Parker was drafted 28th overall. Manu Ginobili was picked 57th. I mean, these are people who like,
Yeah.
they're just like, they're guys that you're never going to forget your whole life. You watch basketball, you will never forget the game of Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili, right? As long as you're alive. So we'll let Toke cook on it a little bit, but yeah, I would argue significant organizational impact.
Yeah, I mean, all I would point to is, like, I think I made this clear on Twitter as well. The Spurs are obviously a better run organization than the Kings. So anything I'm about to say is not to argue like the Kings are well run. I just think the Spurs are overrated as an organization. Like, to me, there are other organizations that have actually won less that I would be more impressed with. Like Oklahoma City has never won a championship, yet they have Kevin Durant leave for nothing. They trade Russell Westbrook. They trade Paul George, and they bring in Shea and a bunch of draft picks, and they're able to reload in like 4 years. And they're, maybe going to make the finals this year as the second youngest team to ever be a 1 seed in playoff history. The first team was them last year, being the 1 seed. So when we're looking at San Antonio, it's like, what did they do? Like, what did Popovich do? What did the executives in San Antonio do over the last 8 years since Duncan retired? Then they got Wemby, and now we're expecting, and it's going to be a disappointment if in 2027, when we have their first round pick, if that's not a pick in the late 20s. So I think that when you have a generational talent, and when I say generational, I mean there's like maybe 6 or 7 players in NBA history you're taking over Tim Duncan. I think that really papers over a lot of mistakes. I think that's how you get a point guard like Tony Parker, who maybe would have been a nice NBA player, and because he learns how to win with like a top 2 player of his era in Tim Duncan, he elevates his game. Ginobili probably was always going to be a really good player. That was a great find. And the Spurs have done a good job in finding guys later in the draft. But the common thread through all this is none of it happens if they don't draft Tim Duncan in 1997. And none of this other stuff that maybe is about to happen with San Antonio would have happened if they didn't get Wemby. So, I did the math right before I went to Vegas. The odds of the Kings not getting a number 1 pick since the year 1990 is 24%. You think about all the years the Kings have been bad, that we should have got the number 1 pick, including the year that Blake Griffin was coming out, the Tyreek Evans, Steph Curry draft, and we got the 4th pick. The Kings have only moved up in the draft 3 times in 40 years. The Spurs are bad like 4 times, and they get 3 number 1 picks. So I mean, it's like, okay, or they get De'Aaron Fox for nothing. It's like, okay, I could be a good executive too if like teams want to just give me their best player for nothing, and then I get a number 1 pick every time I don't make the playoffs. So anyway, all that to be said, like the Spurs, yes, but I think they're overrated as an organization. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying they're not a good organization. I'm not saying the stability is not important. As a matter of fact, I was against firing Mike Brown. I never thought Mike Brown was a good coach, but like George said, good organizations don't just fire their coach when they have a rough patch. We've since learned that really there was a civil war going on in the locker room, I think, between some of the players being on board with Mike Brown and most of them not liking him, and the front office sided with the majority. And I mean, the thing was just handled so poorly. So anyway, guys, go listen to the De'Aaron Fox debacle podcast. It's the first episode that we put out with Geoff as the host. We don't need to rehash all that stuff. But speaking of the Spurs, they got the number 2 pick, so again, they're bad for a couple years. They get the number 1 pick, then they get the number 2 pick. Great. The Kings have gotten the number 2 pick once, and they fumbled that one. So,
to your point, Toke,
yeah,
I think that it is kind of a chicken or the egg thing when it comes to the Spurs, because they made the playoffs for 22 consecutive years from 1998 to 2019. And obviously that's going to be largely due to some of those ballers that they got in the draft, some of those players that they had. And so it's easy to have a stable organization when you're making the playoffs every year. It's easy to not consider firing your coach when you've made the playoffs every year. But I will say it's the last 6 to 8 years where they haven't been very good, and they also haven't fired Popovich, even though there's been
Mhm.
rumors that they were going to fire him. So I don't know if you guys recall that, but there has been some rumors. But they have not gotten rid of him. And I think that is kind of what sets them apart, right? They didn't have 2 or 3 losing seasons. Then they're like, all right, we got to make a change. Sticking with him is kind of what sets them apart from the Kings.
Yeah, and this was my point about going out and getting like a Jeff Van Gundy or someone like that to be the head coach instead of Doug Christie is you control for the variables, right? You know Jeff Van Gundy's a good coach. So if he's your coach and you're not winning, you know that's not the problem. What these stable organizations are doing is, you know Popovich is a good coach. Miami knows Eric Spoelstra is a good coach. Denver probably knew Mike Malone was a good coach until they decided to fire him. But that likely was not a performance issue. That was probably a personality issue with Calvin Booth issue. So yeah, I'm on board. Like stable organizations don't have that turnover. I would rather just hire a coach. Okay, we got Doug Christie. I mean, I don't think he's going to last, but let's give him 4 or 5 years before we even consider firing him. Like, I'm good with
I
that.
would rather we not pay the SMUD bill. Oh wait, we might be carbon neutral or whatever. We might not have a SMUD bill downtown. But I would say we don't pay the SMUD bill. We host no games and do nothing until we have a freaking point guard on the team. Like if Keon Ellis or Devin Carter or whoever is going to be bringing the ball up the court, it doesn't matter who's coaching your team.
Yeah,
We have serious personnel problems.
I agree with that.
Humongous personnel problems that have to get solved. Like if you just list out our players and you list out all the money that they make, just to keep things very simple, and you look at what percent of our money we invest in a basketball player who facilitates offense and brings the ball up the floor, it's like laughable. We have to solve that problem. It's a humongous problem that started with the De'Aaron Fox fleecing trade, which continues to be the number one problem of the franchise.
I think that if you look at it from the vantage, so this is the problem with analytics. Like these nerds have convinced themselves that positions don't matter anymore. Like if you can somehow get enough players on there who move the ball, or they're looking at some advanced stats, you don't need a point guard. But we very clearly saw what the team looked like without a point guard. And that's not the only problem with the roster. There's a lot of them. Like you have, I think basically everyone who's under contract besides Keegan is either long term is either a shooting guard or a center. Like you don't have any forwards. Like you have Keegan. Let's see, you got Keon Ellis, DeRozan, who's a guard, Murray, Sabonis, Lyles is a free agent, Monk, shooting guard, McDermott, who cares? Who cares? Devin Carter's a shooting guard. Zach LaVine's a shooting guard. Valanciunas is a center. Jake LaRavia is a free agent, so he doesn't care. I mean, like you don't have a power forward on your roster. You have a bunch of small forward. You have 2 guys who could play small forward if you're counting LaRavia, if we are able to re-sign him, which who cares if we do or not? That's irrelevant. And yeah, you don't have a point guard. You signed Markelle Fultz. Like that was your solution. You didn't even try to get a point guard in the De'Aaron Fox trade, or you didn't try to turn around and take one of those second-round picks you got for Fox because that's really the only thing you got for him. And instead of getting Valanciunas and Jake LaRavia, get a point guard. Malik Monk's not a point guard. We learned that the hard way.
We've proven that.
So
hey, let's be fair. They probably did try to get a point guard from San Antonio, but San Antonio just was not willing to give it up. We got to be fair to our guys. I'm sure they tried their hardest, and they just got denied. But I have heard a potential trade that I wanted to throw out to you guys.
okay.
That I thought was kind of interesting. There's been some rumblings of a Domantas Sabonis trade for Jrue Holiday and Al Horford. That you kind of have to include Al Horford to make the money line up. It's really a Jrue Holiday and Domantas Sabonis straight up trade.
Yeah, done.
Agreed.
I would make it immediately.
That's
right?
not a
Yeah, but
long-term solution, but yeah,
no, I think Holiday
yeah.
is under contract. I believe he's under contract for 2 or 3 more years. Maybe he has a player option on the third year or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that honestly, that one deal I think would solve a lot of our problems because as we talked about on the last podcast, I think that Sabonis kind of frankly ruins the way we have to run our offense in order for him to be successful. And with what we're paying him, he has to the offense has to run a certain way. So we can get that out of there, and we can have a solid, really solid point guard that comes in.
Does he fit in Boston, you think?
I don't know. Well, again, they're gonna have to kind of redo a lot of stuff because if they lose Drew Holiday,
And
we'll
Tatum.
see how Tatum
Tatum's out.
comes back. Yeah, we'll see how Tatum comes back. So they're gonna have to redo a lot. Porzingis is essentially unplayable at this point. So they got some they got some reworking to do. Not rebuilding, of course, but some reworking to do.
I would love that trade. I mean, I think at this point, you need guys like Sabonis on your team because I don't think this is what's going to work. I don't think tearing it down and tanking is going to work. I think you need good players on the team so that when you do get young talents, they're not expected right away to carry the load. They can grow into that. I think that was maybe the idea with Keegan Murray, but that just never worked out. But with someone like Sabonis, just because of the amount of money he makes and the risk that he might ask out soon anyways, I think that it's time to move on. You have another center you can use for the next couple years in Valanciunas.
Yep.
And I think with all these positions, you need to find a solution long term. There are no there's nothing that's your opportunity to get long term solutions went away when you traded De'Aaron Fox. That was the asset that was going to net you young prospects, and you got none for them. So,
I think
And
the
we need to
question is,
stop with this stuff where Sabonis is dribbling the ball up the floor and all
yeah,
that. Like, you need a primary ball handler who's a guard who can score and who can pass. And forget about all the bean counters. Like, just watch the basketball, right? Watch the playoffs right now. I mean, look, the NBA playoffs right now, they're fantastic. But look at who are the primary ball handlers, who's bringing the ball up the floor, who's a threat as a scorer and as a passer from the Knicks. Brunson, right?
Brunson.
Boston,
right.
Holiday,
Yep.
the Pacers, Halliburton, Minnesota, Anthony Edwards, OKC, Shea, and Denver. Like, if you watch them tonight, look at what Jamal Murray did. Like, every single one of these teams have a very, very competent point guard and scorer in that position, bringing the ball up and facilitating the offense and kind of controlling the flow of the game. We don't have that. We have Sabonis kind of all over the place, walking the ball up the floor, running it up. And then we really just have, if you look at our assists that we have per game, it's laughable. It's just one-on-one sort of action. And that just doesn't work in today's NBA. So my argument is, if you have a move like that on the table, you make it right away and get yourself a primary ball handler who can score and pass and facilitate offense through that person. That's what you need to chase in today's NBA.
I agree
100%.
100%.
Yeah, I think to go back to an older podcast again, what do we need to do to get that 1A player? Because in my mind, the only way we get a 1A player is through the draft. And that means that we have to you're not usually going to get a 1A player late in the draft. And so you got to do it by
Okay.
getting early draft picks. And so
Who are the top 5 players in the NBA right now?
got Joker, Shea, Anthony Edwards.
Yanni?
Is he still?
Arguably. He's there.
Yeah. Is Luka up there? I
Luka,
don't know.
for sure.
Luka. Okay, so Luka and Anthony Edwards, I think, were both top 3 picks. The other 3 guys were not top 10 picks. And then you could take guys like, just to throw some names out there, a Paul George, not a top 10 pick. I think he might have been 10.
Yeah, fair.
But, like Jimmy Butler was a 30th pick in the draft. Like, guys, there's always a star on the board. You are more likely maybe to get them, the higher your draft pick is. But I mean, even if you look at the Warriors, they got Klay Thompson at number 11. They got Green in the second group. I think Draymond Green is one of the most overrated players in NBA history, but whatever. Like, people think he's good. He was like the 32nd pick or 30.
Right. Yep.
You know, like, there are always, like, this is a thing. The number one quality you could have as a front office is the ability to evaluate talent. And then the number two thing is to put that talent together in a way that's competent. What you ended up having with the analytics here in Sacramento is them doing a lot of bizarre things, basically a bunch of third and fourth year college players who never had a lot of upside, who were basically who they were going to be their rookie year. And a lot of the times they were all playing the same position that you already had, whether it was Halliburton or Davion Mitchell or even Devin Carter. Like, none of these picks make any sense, right? And then while you're looking at all that, instead of Devin Carter, you could have taken that kid from Sacramento, McCain or whatever, that the Sixers got.
Mm-hmm.
You could have taken Dalton Connect, who actually plays a position that you need. Like,
right. Yep.
So how do you get that 1A? I think if you're not going to get the number one pick in a year that Wemby or Duncan is coming out, which, like, that's the easiest way.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
Okay. But if you're not going to do that, I think you just got to try to be as good of a team as you can. Like, when Paul George went to the Pacers, they had Danny Granger. They were a playoff team. They were making the playoffs. They were doing all that. And Paul George was allowed to grow into that and become a star. And then that became his team after a couple years. Like, I think that's a model that you could follow. Maybe there are other franchises you want to emulate that are better than the Pacers, but it's just an easy one that I think comes to mind. The Spurs, they got Kawhi Leonard because they traded George Hill, who was their backup point guard, to get this kid that they scouted, and they picked, I think, at number 11 or number 12. Kawhi was a 12th pick. So you don't need a tank to get one of these guys. There are other ways to do it.
Yeah, and we're likely not going to get him via trade. So I think back to Jeff's question, it's like, hey, how do you get one of these guys? You're probably not getting them on trade. Most of these teams are re-signing these top guys to super max deals or max deals, so they're not going anywhere. They're building around them. They're winning. There's no reason for them to move them unless you have a freak scenario like what's going on in Boston, right?
Or Jalen Brunson in New York. That's another one.
Yeah, well, a lot of that comes down to development too. Right. Like, so the question is, how do you invest in your talent and develop them within an organization, which is something we're not good at? I mean, how many players have left Sacramento within the first 5 years of their career and then they blossomed in other franchises? That's because they were developed by those other franchises. That's something we're not doing. That may be because of how we invest in development. It may be because of who's doing the development. I mean, I don't know why, but that's the recipe is you have to develop them here.
I agree with that. And I do think it's striking to watch some of these players. Like, I was watching Halliburton. It's like, okay, that guy's a close to a 1A player, if not a 1A player. But even you look at guys like Buddy Hield, who went off for the Warriors this last series. It's like I can't help but laugh because Buddy Hield is their fourth or fifth option on the team. And we were trying to make him our number one option, right? So, like, I think that's like our biggest problem, kind of perennially, is that we constantly try to make these guys who are really third, fourth, or fifth options. We try to make them number one. Same, Keegan Murray. We try to make Keegan Murray our number one guy. Everyone's like, he's the next coming of whoever. It's like, we need to let these guys play the role that they're supposed to play. And we need to be quick to move on from guys who aren't 1A players. And Keegan Murray, by the way, is a great example of somebody that we're going to have to decide if we're going to pay him big money or if we're going to have to move on. And I tell you what, I'm leaning way towards move on. Because, again,
if you're going to have to pay him more than $20 million a year, he's got to go.
But
now, you got a problem because if you let him go, he's the only guy who plays defense.
So I don't even think he's worth the 6 he's making right now, let alone 20.
You got to recognize that a lot earlier because there was a time where Keegan Murray's trade value was through the roof.
We could have had Siakam. We could have had Siakam.
Right.
We could have had a lot of other guys for Keegan.
We wait until these guys, shit the bed, for lack of a better term. And it's like we wait for these guys for their value to just absolutely plummet, and then we decide if we're going to pay them big money. It's like, guys, we got to recognize this stuff earlier and move on.
Yeah.
And the ironic part is we open the checkbook for guys like Levine. Like, we're not early to move on guys like Keegan to get some value for them and invest. But then we open up the checkbook for a guy like Levine, who no one else wants to take on that contract.
Literally no one. If there was a single other team, the Bulls would have traded him earlier.
And the guy that has value, we wait till he tells us who he's going to go to. Right?
And then we send him there.
And then we send him there because he asked so nicely. It's like,
and then we do a tribute video for him.
Stop the madness.
Well, look, it's getting pretty late over here. So I just want to get to the draft lottery because I think that, we would be derelict in our duty if we didn't address this. So in, I think 2012 or 2011, Chris Paul was traded to the Lakers. Well, he was traded to the Clippers, and then the Pelicans the Hornets at the time got the number 1 pick, and they got Anthony Davis. A few years later, Anthony Davis got traded to the Lakers, and the Pelicans got the number 1 pick again, and they drafted Zion. And now Dallas has traded Luka to the Lakers, and lo and behold, 1.8% chance to get the number 1 pick. They got it. Thoughts?
I think you're a conspiracy theorist if you don't believe this was rigged.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of takes on here like, do you know how many people would have, or what's the incentive? Like, if people really thought that the draft was rigged, if they actually did that, they would stop watching. It's like, guys, you're totally out of touch. Like, half of the people already think everything is rigged, yet I think everything is rigged. I do. I watched, like, my entire worldview is shaped by the 2002 Western Conference Finals. There's nothing you're going to say that's going to convince me that was on the up and up. And just to compound that, Tim Donaghy already went on the record saying that the NBA would, exactly how they would rig games. They would assign certain officials to certain games to get certain outcomes based on personal preferences or different beefs they had with various players or various coaches. And that's how it's done. Does the NBA literally write a script that the players are involved in? No, they just do these little subtle moves that inch things in a certain direction. Now, with a lottery, I've heard a lot of people say, well, Ernst Young audits the lottery or whatever, and they wouldn't put their name on it if it wasn't on the up and up. And it's like, guys, look, I don't know about Ernst Young. I don't know about the lottery procedure and everything, where exactly the scam would be. I'm not here to tell you I have some sort of hidden knowledge, but just let's take a step back. The idea that people with a financial incentive might do something unethical to get a result that's in their financial interest, is that really something that in 2025 is mind-blowing to people?
Outlandish.
I don't understand. The Kings never win the lottery, but then these teams are bad for 2 years and they get the number 1 pick and then they're back to being at the top. It's just look, I don't know. I don't know who's in on it. I don't know if the owners are in on it. I don't know if it's just at the top level, whatever, but something's not on the up and up, because just statistically, it's more likely that that's happening than that the Dallas Mavericks are getting the number 1 pick. I would put the odds of it at greater than 1.8%.
Again, I don't think you have to know the whole procedure to understand that it's rigged. If it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck. When every person I know has the same exact reaction when the Mavericks get the number 1 pick, and the reaction is essentially, how did we not already call this? How did we not see it coming? The only person that actually called it was Bill Simmons, and he actually called that right when they traded Luka that they were going to get the number 1 pick. But everyone I know had the same reaction. It's of course they got the number 1 pick, because that trade was so outrageous and it made absolutely no sense for them not to get maximum value. Again, we could retread that trade all day, but it made no sense unless they got the number 1 pick. And when everyone has the same opinion, it's like, or the same reaction, it's like, dude, it's usually right. It's usually that's usually the way it goes.
Anything to add, George?
Well, I mean, the big question is, what do we think about Cooper Flagg? I mean, obviously they're going to take Cooper Flagg at number 1. How does he fit into that offense? I mean, it's kind of ironic. Like, he is really an all-around great player who makes a lot of folks around him better, right? A lot like Luka. It's just a lot of parallels there. It'll be interesting, like, how he's going to fit there. I don't know. I'm curious your guys' thoughts, but I think he's consensus number 1, and he's an unbelievable player with a big potential.
I didn't actually get a chance to watch him at Duke a whole lot, but I've been seeing this kid's highlights, no joke, for the last like 5 or 6 years. Like since he was like 14 years old, 13 years old, I've been seeing this kid's highlights. I remember watching a video of somebody, gosh, I can't remember who it was, but it was like a big time coach a big time college coach that invited him over to play a pickup game when he was like 13. He invited him to play with the college kids, and he was like dunking on these college kids, and he was punking these college kids, and they all were like their jaws were on the floor. And so I mean, listen, he's been playing high level basketball for a long time, so I'm sure he's going to do well. But we'll see. We'll see. The NBA is a whole different beast. There's people that you think are going to do well that don't pan out. So we'll see.
Look, I've been watching the NBA for 30 years, give or take. I've seen a lot of guys come in with hype and not live up to it. I've seen a lot of guys that no one thought anything of, and they turn out being all-stars. I mean, all the indicators are this kid's going to be a star. Is he a French? Is he a 1A? Is he a championship type of guy? I don't know, maybe, but I think at a minimum he's going to be a high-end starter, if not an all-star. And really that's all you could ask for with like a high-level pick. You can't – like that superstar tier, you get that once every like 6 or 7 years. Like literally it was like Tim Duncan – then the next one was LeBron. Then the next one was probably, I don't know, like Derrick Rose. Like, it's not something that you get every year. I'm not sure Cooper Flagg's in that category.
I was going to say, I don't know if he's there.
But I think that he's definitely, like, going to have a long career as a high-level player.
He also has an epic name.
He's going to be a high-level.
That is a good name.
Yeah, it's
like these guys have winning names, right? Like when you hear like Luka Doncic or like Cooper Flagg or I don't know, whoever, LeBron James, like these guys just have epic names. Like when you hear a guy like, I don't know, like Marvin Bagley III, I'm like, okay, this guy's going to suck just based on his name.
We can't take
like he just doesn't sound good, right? Like we gotta, I feel like you got to take an assessment on the guy's name and whether it's got star potential. This is Cooper Flagg. It's a big name. It's going to be a big name. You can feel it.
Honestly,
I think you're likely
if
right.
If the Kings drafted only on name, we would have done better than the way we've drafted.
We literally would have. Well, okay, let me ask you guys. In 2025, we've had now 40 years of the NBA draft lottery. Is it time to carpet bomb the lottery too? Or if we were to keep the lottery, would we change it? What do you guys think?
Man, it seems pretty simple to get one of those ping pong ball machines out and just do it the most obvious and transparent way possible.
Yeah, like
they did that with envelopes. It wasn't very. It was obvious.
Yeah, dude,
it was transparent, but
the envelopes are not the same as the ping pong balls.
Look,
like, show us yourselves putting the ping pong balls in. Say we're gonna do 2 test ping pong ball runs, and the third one's legit. And if they all come out the number 6, then we know it's rigged. It's like there is such a simple, like, elementary way to prove that this is not rigged. But
there's still going to be people who think it's rigged, especially if you get like a weird result, like Derrick Rose, his hometown team has the number 1 pick, or LeBron James, his hometown team has the number 1 pick. Why not just say, you know what? Teams are already tanking. Like there's this, like the lottery was there to disincentivize tanking, but it's like teams still do it. So like, why not just do what the NFL does and just do inverse of your record? And like, let's just have an honest system. There's no rigging that.
Yeah, I think I'm on.
Because the NBA wants to have its cake and eat it too.
Well, yeah, it's easier for them to finagle things.
I say just do it in reverse order because look, no matter how transparent and whatever, I've seen enough David Blaine to tell you that, you know what, no matter what you do,
Yep.
like there's something they'll come up with to trick the eye or to trick, the situation. So maybe you just get to something that's a bit more fair. And look, if teams tank, they tank. That is what it is. I mean, to a degree, they're already doing that anyway.
They're already doing it.
Oh, for sure they are.
I mean, I'm the most anti-tank person ever, and I was like, the Kings should have tanked the last 10 games of the season, because if they had lost 2 more games, they would have kept their pick, and maybe they would have had the number 1 pick. So
that's it.
All right, guys. Well, it's late, and I have to go give a ride to someone who has surgery in the morning. So I'm going to have to call it there. We've been going for about an hour. George, you're our guest. So any last words?
No, just an absolute pleasure to be here. It was a lot of fun, a lot of good laughs, a lot of good takes. You guys keep doing the great work you're doing. It's a lot of fun listening, and just appreciate you guys having me. And hopefully I'll come back another time, and I will not bring a pandemic with me. That's a guarantee I'll make, but thanks again for having me.
All right, everyone. Go Kings.
Go Kings.